47 warships, 2 aircraft carriers, a submarine screen stretching 300 nautical miles, variable depth sonar sweeps running 24 hours a day, sonobuoy fields dense enough to track a whale, and none of it detected the submarine sitting 22 miles from the Shandong. That's the number that should keep every naval planner in Beijing awake. Not 22,000, not 200, 22 nautical miles. From a carrier whose entire reason for existing is to project power into waters it controls. Let's be precise about what happened, because precision is the point. In February 2026, the PLA Navy launched its largest ever winter exercise east of Taiwan. 47 surface combatants, 2 carriers, the Shandong and the Liaoning, at least 4 Type 039 sea diesel-electric submarines operating in ambush positions along the exercise perimeter. The stated objective was straightforward: demonstrate that the Taiwan Strait is a Chinese lake. State media broadcast live footage. Military commentators used the word sealed. On day 4, a Virginia-class attack submarine surfaced deliberately inside the exercise perimeter. Not at the edge, not in a gap, inside. The submarine, believed to be USS Montana, SSN 794, had been threading through that defense network for at least 72 hours. 3 full days inside the most heavily patrolled water the PLA Navy has ever maintained during a live exercise. And when Indopacom gave the order to surface, Montana did not surface because she had been detected. She surfaced because detection was the message. Every other channel will give you the same take. A submarine embarrassed China. That's the headline, the thumbnail, the story. Wrong framing. The right question is not whether Montana got in. The right question is why the most expensive anti-submarine network China has ever deployed could not find her. Because the answer is not about one submarine. It's about an equation. And that equation has implications that reach far beyond a single exercise east of Taiwan. The math. China spent roughly 4 years building its anti-submarine warfare capability, specifically for this scenario. The Type 039C is the latest evolution of the Yuan-class diesel-electric boat. Air-independent propulsion, flank-mounted sonar arrays, an acoustic signature so low that Western intelligence assessments classify it as peer competitive in literal environments. 4 of those boats were deployed along the exercise perimeter. Their job was simple: sit quietly, listen, and kill anything that tried to penetrate. On top of that, the PLA Navy deployed at least 6 Type 054A frigates in an ASW screen. Each frigate carries a towed array sonar and hull-mounted sonar capable of detecting a submarine at moderate range in favorable conditions. Add the sonobuoy fields, likely hundreds of expendable passive sonobuoys dropped in overlapping patterns across the exercise area. Add the variable depth sonar sweeps from the Type 055 destroyers, the most capable surface combatants in the Chinese fleet. Add at least 2 KQ-200 maritime patrol aircraft, China's equivalent of the P-8 Poseidon, flying continuous patterns overhead with magnetic anomaly detectors and active sonobuoy drops. That's not a screen. That's a wall. And Montana went through it. Here's the detail that makes this extraordinary. The Virginia class is not a small submarine. She displaces 7,900 tons submerged. Her length is 377 feet. She carries a crew of 132. This is not a miniature drone or an unmanned vehicle slipping through a gap. This is a nuclear-powered attack submarine the size of a football field, moving at walking speed through layered defenses designed specifically to find her. The cost of that Chinese ASW network, just the assets deployed for this single exercise, runs north of $11 billion. 4 Type 039C submarines at roughly $500 million each. 6 Type 054A frigates at $350 million each. 2 Type 055 destroyers at 900 million each. Sonobuoys, aircraft hours, fuel, maintenance. Call it 12 billion when you account for the carrier groups themselves. USS Montana cost approximately $3.4 billion. One platform, $3.4 billion, against $12 billion of purpose-built detection infrastructure, and the $3.4 billion won. That's the equation Beijing does not want you to see. I spent hours going through the publicly available data on this incident. AIS shipping records, flight tracker archives, satellite imagery timestamps. And one detail kept nagging me: the repositioning. Within hours of Montana's surfacing, satellite imagery showed the Shandong carrier group abandoning its original exercise track and repositioning 80 miles further east. 80 miles. In naval terms, that is not an adjustment. That is a retreat. Think about what that means operationally. The PLA Navy had spent months planning this exercise. The track was calculated to demonstrate control over specific water that matters in a Taiwan contingency. The positioning of every ship, every submarine, every aircraft was optimized for that track. And in under 6 hours, the entire formation pulled back because a single submarine surfaced and said, "I was here the whole time." The detection math is where things get uncomfortable for Beijing. Anti-submarine warfare operates on probability. No sensor finds a submarine with certainty. Every detection method has a probability of detection, what the Navy calls PD, that depends on ocean conditions, target depth, target speed, ambient noise, thermocline layers, and dozens of other variables. A sonobuoy field with a PD of 0.3 means that for any given pass, you have a 30% chance of detecting the target. Stack multiple sonobuoy fields, multiple sonar sweeps, multiple platforms, and the cumulative probability rises. But here's what the textbooks often skip. Cumulative probability only works if the search areas overlap correctly, if the timing is coordinated, and if the target cooperates by moving predictably. A Virginia-class submarine does none of those things. Montana carries the most advanced acoustic quieting technology in any submarine fleet on Earth. Her propulsion system uses a pumped jet propulsor instead of a traditional propeller. No cavitation, no blade rate tonals, no mechanical noise signature that a passive sonobuoy can lock onto. Her reactor plant is mounted on rafts isolated from the hull by acoustic dampening mounts. Her hull is coated in anechoic tiles that absorb active sonar pings. At low speed, 3 to 5 knots, her radiated noise level drops below the ambient ocean background. She becomes quieter than the ocean itself. That's not a metaphor. That's engineering. When the radiated noise of a submarine falls below the ambient noise floor of the surrounding water, passive sonar cannot distinguish the submarine from the environment. You're listening for a whisper in a thunderstorm. Except, the whisper is designed to be quieter than the thunder. Now here's the obstacle that makes Montana's transit even more remarkable. The East China Sea in February is not deep water. Average depth runs between 40 and 200 meters across the exercise area. A Virginia-class submarine optimized for deep ocean operations had to work in a shallow, acoustically complex environment where sound bounces off the bottom, off the surface, off thermal layers, creating a chaotic acoustic picture. Shallow water should favor the defender. More reflections mean more chances to catch a stray signal. Montana's crew solved that problem by using the chaos against the Chinese sensors. In shallow water, active sonar returns are cluttered with bottom bounces and surface reflections. A skilled submarine crew can position the boat in acoustic shadow zones, areas where the geometry of sound propagation creates dead spots in the sonar coverage. Every thermocline layer, every change in water temperature with depth, bends sound waves. If you know where those bends occur, and Virginia-class submarines carry the most sophisticated oceanographic sensors in any Navy, you can plot a path that stays inside the blind spots for 72 hours. 3 days threading between sonobuoy fields. 3 days adjusting depth to stay below the thermocline when a Type 055 ran a variable depth sonar sweep. 3 days matching speed to ambient current so that the flow noise over the hull generated 0 detectable signal. 3 days while Chinese state media told the world the Taiwan Strait was sealed. What strikes us about this incident is not Montana's capability. We've covered Virginia-class technology in previous videos. What strikes us is what it reveals about the fundamental asymmetry in undersea warfare. China has spent 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars building a surface fleet that looks formidable on satellite imagery. But anti-submarine warfare is not about looking formidable. It's about hearing a whisper. And hearing a whisper requires something money cannot buy. Decades of institutional experience hunting submarines in deep water. The United States Navy has been doing this since 1945. 81 years. Every generation of American submarine has been tested against every generation of American anti-submarine warfare, and vice versa. That feedback loop, that constant adversarial evolution, is what produces crews who can thread a Virginia-class boat through a layered defense network in shallow water for 3 days. The PLA Navy has been doing open ocean ASW for roughly 15 years. That's not a criticism. That's math. 15 years of institutional experience against 81. The equipment gap is closing. The experience gap is not. Type shadow in the comments if you think Montana's crew earned a unit citation for this transit. The surfacing itself was not an accident. INDOPACOM authorized the maneuver as a deliberate strategic signal. And the engineering of that signal tells you more about American strategic thinking than any white paper. Montana surfaced 22 miles from the Shandong carrier group. That number is not random. 22 nautical miles is inside the theoretical engagement envelope of every weapon Montana carries. A Mark 48 AD cap torpedo has a range exceeding 25 nautical miles. A Tomahawk cruise missile can reach over 1,000. At 22 miles, Montana was not just inside the exercise. She was inside the kill chain. The message was not, "We can find you." The message was, "We were already here. We chose when to let you know." Here's the take that will probably get us some pushback, but it needs to be said. This incident exposes the single most dangerous assumption in Chinese naval planning. The belief that quantity of ASW assets translates to quality of ASW coverage. Beijing deployed more anti-submarine platforms for this exercise than any PLA Navy formation has ever assembled. And it was not enough. Not because the individual platforms were inadequate. The Type 039C is a capable boat. The Type 055 is a formidable surface combatant. But anti-submarine warfare is not a hardware problem. It's a systems problem. Systems require integration, experience, and the kind of institutional muscle memory that only comes from decades of hunting real submarines in real oceans. Subscribe to Navy Strikeforce. We don't celebrate weapons. We calculate whether they work. What happened after Montana surfaced tells the second half of the story. 3 Type 05 destroyers converged on Montana's position. These are 10,000-ton warships, each carrying 64 vertical launch cells, advanced radar systems, and integrated combat management systems that Chinese state media routinely calls equivalent to the American Ticonderoga class. They arrived in formation. They activated fire control radar. PLA Air Force J. 16 fighters scrambled from bases on the mainland. 2 flights of 4, fully armed with anti-ship missiles. And Montana did nothing. She sat on the surface. She did not dive. She did not maneuver. She did not activate fire control systems. She sat there while 3 destroyers and 8 fighters surrounded her, and she waited. That patience is the part most people will miss. Montana's crew knew they were safe, not because the Chinese would not shoot, but because in that moment, Every action China took was being recorded by every sensor in the American intelligence architecture. Every radar emission, every communication frequency, every formation pattern, every response timeline. The surfacing was not just a message to Beijing. It was a collection operation. Put yourself in the shoes of the Shandong's commanding officer for a moment. You've spent 3 days conducting the largest exercise your Navy has ever attempted. State media has broadcast your formation to the world. Military commentators have declared your control of these waters. And now a foreign submarine is sitting on the surface 22 miles from your flight deck. And your entire anti-submarine network, the sonobuoys, the patrol aircraft, the 4 diesel-electric submarines supposedly guarding the perimeter, failed to detect it. Every decision you make in the next 60 minutes will be analyzed in Beijing for years. If you escalate, you risk an incident with the United States. If you do nothing, you confirm that your ASW screen is porous. If you reposition, you admit that the exercise track you spent months planning is compromised. The Shandong's group chose to reposition 80 miles east, and that decision, quiet as it was, echoes through the entire Chinese defense establishment. One detail stuck with me from the AIS data. When the Shandong group moved east, it did not simply shift position. The entire formation changed shape. The ASW screen tightened. The picket destroyers pulled closer to the carrier. The exercise track, originally designed to demonstrate wide area control, compressed into a defensive posture centered on protecting the carriers themselves. That's the geometry of lost confidence. Before Montana surfaced, the formation was offensive, spread out, projecting power. After Montana surfaced, the formation was defensive, contracted, protecting itself. The shift happened in under 6 hours, and it tells you exactly how the PLA Navy assessed the threat, the full equation, and why it matters. China's Taiwan contingency planning rests on several assumptions. First, that the PLA Navy can establish sea control in the waters east and south of Taiwan. Second, that this sea control can deny American submarines access to the operational theater. Third, that carrier-based aviation operating from the Shandong and the Fujian can provide air superiority over the strait. Montana's transit invalidated Assumption 2. 72 hours inside the densest ASW network the PLA Navy has ever deployed. If a single Virginia-class boat can penetrate that network undetected, what can 5 do? What can 10? The United States Navy operates approximately 20 Virginia-class submarines, with more entering the fleet every year. In a Taiwan contingency, Indopacom could deploy 6 to 8 of those boats into the operational theater. If each boat achieves even half the penetration success Montana demonstrated, the math becomes catastrophic for Chinese surface forces. A Virginia-class submarine carries 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles in its vertical launch system and roughly 25 Mark 48 AD-cap torpedoes. One boat inside the screen can prosecute multiple high-value targets: carriers, amphibious ships, logistics vessels. Before the Chinese ASW network even confirms its presence, 6 boats operating independently can sustain a persistent threat across the entire exercise area simultaneously. Run the attrition. If each Virginia-class boat prosecutes 3 high-value targets before being localized, and Montana demonstrated that localization takes far longer than 72 hours, 6 boats can threaten 18 major surface combatants. The entire PLA Navy Eastern Theater Command operates approximately 40 principal surface combatants, 6 submarines, 18 targets, a 45% attrition rate before the first carrier air wing launches a sortie. We told you in the video on the Ford Carrier Group deployment that carrier versus carrier warfare is not about flight decks. It's about the undersea fight that happens before the first jet takes off. Montana just proved that thesis. The Virginia class does not need to sink the Shandong. It needs to force the Shandong 80 miles further from Taiwan. And at 80 miles further east, Chinese carrier aviation loses loiter time over the strait. Every mile the carrier pulls back translates to minutes of fuel that fighters burn getting to and from the combat zone. Minutes of fuel that reduce payload, reduce station time, reduce combat effectiveness. Montana did not fire a weapon. She cost the Shandong 20 minutes of fighter loiter time over Taiwan just by being there. Zero ordnance expended. China abandoned the entire exercise track. Here's the equation nobody in Beijing wants written down. China spent approximately $12 billion deploying an anti-submarine network for this exercise. The United States spent $3.4 billion on Montana, a one-time construction cost amortized across a 40-year service life. The operational cost of Montana's 3-day transit, fuel, crew, opportunity cost, rounds to roughly $2 million. $2 million to invalidate $12 billion of deployed capability. That's a 6,000 to 1 cost ratio. In America's favor. And unlike a missile that gets fired once, Montana goes home, reloads, and does it again. Would you have ordered the surfacing? Think about that for a moment. The submarine was safe, undetected. It could have continued collecting intelligence for days, perhaps weeks. Every hour inside the Chinese formation was hours of acoustic data, communication intercepts, formation patterns, response protocols, intelligence gold. Surfacing ended that collection. Indopacom made the calculation that the strategic message was worth more than continued intelligence collection. That is a judgment call that will be debated in war colleges for decades. What this means for the next 5 years. Beijing's response will be predictable and expensive. More Type 039 sea submarines, more sonobuoys, more maritime patrol aircraft, more investment in underwater sensor networks, fixed arrays on the seabed, autonomous underwater vehicles, perhaps quantum magnetic anomaly detection if the technology matures. The PLA Navy will spend tens of billions trying to close the ASW gap. But here's the counterintuitive part. Every dollar China spends on ASW is a dollar not spent on the surface fleet, the amphibious fleet, the Air Force, or the missile force. Montana did not just penetrate a defense network. She shifted China's entire defense investment calculus. She forced Beijing to pour resources into a domain where the United States holds an 81-year institutional advantage. A domain where catching up is not a matter of building more hardware, but of accumulating the operational experience that only time provides. That's not a limitation of Chinese engineering. That's the physics of institutional learning. You cannot accelerate experience. You can only accumulate it. 1 Virginia-class submarine, 3 days, 0 shots fired, and the strategic geometry of the Western Pacific shifted measurably east. The most powerful message in naval warfare is not a missile launch. It's a periscope breaking the surface in water your enemy thought was his. Subscribe to Navy Strikeforce, because what Montana demonstrated is the equation that will define the next war before the first shot is fired. The Shandong has repositioned. The exercise track is abandoned. The ASW gap is exposed. But here's the open question. No analysis can answer yet. China knows now. They know the screen failed. They know the gap exists. The question is not whether they will try to fix it. The question is whether they can fix it before the next Virginia class arrives, and whether next time the submarine surfaces at all.